Economics, Baroda, Gujarat. Sir has total 17 years of experience, out of which 5 years in academics and 12 years in industry. He has worked on various challenging projects at national and international levels in the pile foundations, design of underground structures, slope stability analysis of large embankments, ground improvements, design and development of ash pond and raw water reservoir, and in many more areas. Sir has completed his PhD in civil engineering from IIT Bombay and has closely working with L&T Power, NTPC Limited, Rajasthan Rajya Vidyut Uttar Nigam Limited, Bangladesh Power Development Board, and many more renowned national and international bodies. His major research areas include modeling, soil structure interaction problems for power projects, intake structures, feasibility study and review of EIA studies for the development of ash pond and raw water reservoir and other plant facilities, slope stability and settlement studies, design of ground improvement methodologies, liquefaction and ground response analysis, and many more. Sir has published more than 20 research papers in reputed international and national journals and conferences. Sir is also an associate member at American Society of Civil Engineers and member at Indian Geotechnical Society. We are pleased to have such a renowned expert with us and having an opportunity to gain some knowledge from his findings and experience. So over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Just a moment. Sorry, let us move it to it. Hi, this is Jay Kumar from Geodynamics, and today we are going to discuss. Am I audible, right?
Yes, sir.
If you have any, let's say, questions or something, you can write into, let's say, chat box. I will be having a chat box, a small window opened over here. So probably if you have an immediate question, you can, let's say, ping me through chat. We will be answering all those questions, or we will be addressing the questions at the end of the presentation.
Yes, sir. Participants can post their questions in the chat box, in the question and answer box. And if they wish to interact, then they can raise their hand and we'll enable them to speak. Okay, then they'll be able to interact.
Correct. So basically, the topic is covered with tailing disposal, or I would say tailing dams. In all international literatures or standards, whenever you refer it, it has been more like a tailing disposal area or tailing disposal system. And in India, probably we are more suitable or more conversant with the term, what we call it is ash pond, where we will be disposing the ash in a very huge quantity and try to store them within the area, assigned area. So our discussion would be mainly on ash pond and tailing disposal. Okay. The topic of discussions would be the overview of ash pond facility, some statutory requirements and regulations. Then in this, again, we will go with the type of ash pond disposal systems. I will not go much into detail on systems and mechanical systems or associated systems, a part of it, but whatever has been close to or associated with civil engineering, probably we'll try to highlight them. And then we will further penetrate more into design, inputs and sizing. And the last one, we will have some particular concerns or considerations which are morely related to design of ash pond and ash containment systems. Sorry. Okay. Basically, whenever we say a pond, or I would say area in which we would like to store our wastage materials, the ash is mostly generated through power plants in India, and those power plants are mostly coal-based power plants. So the coal will be utilized in the boiler for having a, let's say, gaining the heat by firing the coal. In turn, the coal will be converted into the ash, and that ash would be then either would be consumed or utilized somewhere else, or would be put or as a wastage materials into the ash pond and stored them. So whenever you will be able to utilize them later on, probably you will pick from the ash pond and then you use them. The storage capacity of the area requirement is mostly governed by the government norms for suitable capacity of power plant that we will be, let's say, further reviewing. But the storage capacity depends on some of the key aspects, which are the power plant major considerations, or a key design input will be a capacity of power plant. So it would be a 250 megawatt, 500 megawatt, or 660 megawatt, or 700 megawatt. So based on the power plant size, the storage capacity requirement changes. Then the design life, here the design life is not related to the power plant structures, but the design life of ash pond, or I would say the storage life of ash pond. Then average plant load factor, which is nothing but how much efficiency you have be running your power plant, and corresponding generation of ash is also depend on plant load factor. Then another is very much more dependent is the coal parameter, the calorific value of coal, or I would say whether you will be using Indian coal or you will be using international coal or imported coals. That depends the generation, amount of generation of ash from the power plant. Then ultimate height of the dike, up to what height you want to raise them. And these all are requirement based on the power plant configuration, where a civil engineer may not have a control out of it. However, when you say you need some certain capacity or certain area, probably it is largely hinged to the availability of the area itself. So the land available for the ash pond is also very much important. Then there are some peculiar topographical features. Some features may favor the area, and some features may not be favoring to the ash pond utilization of that area for the ash pond. Then there are key geotechnical considerations. Then the total dike of height, or dike height would be there. And there are some other considerations like the seismic parameters and the designs and the slope stability, and there are some internal let's say internal drainage requirements of the embankment. We can say that there are some ways, or there are some particular methods to store the ash. In one way is the upstream method, which means that in the stage one, you will construct the first embankment, then you will try to dispose the ash and retain the ash within the containment made by the stage one dike. And then in the stage two, you will be then raising your, let's say, second height of the dike, on the deposited ash, and then you raise it for the third height, but the raising would occur in an upstream fashion, so that your storage area would be then reduced in each stage when you raise them. The second is, let's say it would be considered to be a downstream raising, where you have a stage 1 embankment, then you again construct the stage 2 embankment, then you store the ash, then you construct the stage 3 embankment, and then you store the ash. And as you corresponding progress further, probably you will be then raising the dike on the outwards of the first stage embankment. If this is very clear that if you are raising your ash ponds in downstream fashion, probably you will require the parcel of land outside the containment area, and much more land you probably will be requiring in each stage, because your footprint of your embankment is increasing. Say your first, let's say, stage, you will be requiring this footprint, but in the second stage you will be requiring this, third stage you will be requiring even more than that, and the fourth one, and go on. As you go increasing the dike height, or I would say stages, you will be requiring more and more land for your embankment. And the other one is the center line raising, in which the dikes will be raised partly on the settled deposited ash, and some partly on the downstream piece. But your center line of your embankment for each stage will remain same. So we'll be having three typical methods for raising the ash dike. Why it has been raising, or why we require to raise them, we will address it step by step. But I just would like to, let's say, make you all familiar with some terminologies, so that whenever later on we discuss specifically on technical part or civil engineering, let's say, points, probably you will be able to understand what we are discussing. Okay, then again, just to check that some of the favorable topographical features, which means you have some particular valley type of things, and if you construct an embankment over here, probably the small length of embankment, if you construct, probably the more land of the area you will be utilizing for storing the ash. And as you say, the more this particular utilized area, if we divide the length of the embankment, what required for containment, against the volume of the, let's say, the ash could be stored, probably we will try to find out the efficiency, the efforts you require to place for construction of dike or embankment compared to the volume you will be able to store. So this is obvious from the figure that we will be installing a very small length of embankment, but we will get a good amount of ash storage because of a natural topography in such a way that doing so of a small embankment probably will get more benefit. Sometimes you do not have a favorable topography, or you have a flat land or a given land where you probably would like to store your ash. And here, to store the ash, the best way is to excavate this pit in the area assigned, and then the same amount of earth you use to raise the embankment on the periphery. So such that the cut and fill volume, the cut from the pit, or I would say the area, and the fill volume for raising the embankment would remain same. So you will not be, let's say, required to dispose any excavated area or excavated material outside the plant, and whatever has been the excavated from the footprint of ash pond, probably you will be raised the embankments accordingly. However, whenever you see and try to calculate, the excavations areas are more or significantly high compared to the volume what we require for raising the dike. So in such case, the embankment height, or I would say the first stage embankment height, what we call it as a starter dike, would depend on how much of earth is available from the excavation of the ash pond. Before we move on, let's say the engineering aspect of ash pond, let me give some glimpse or some information on what is actually the problem and why it is required, let's say, the collaborative efforts from all the engineering to solve this problem. Now, we all know that our, let's say, electricity generation is mostly by, I would say, thermal power plants in India specifically. Forget the approaches considered by the developed countries, but let us specifically discuss first for our nation. And in India, most of the cases, or I would say the 80% electricity generation is approximately this 80% is by thermal power plant. And this thermal power plant uses the fossil fuel like coal for, let's say, in the boiler to fire their turbines and get the heat. And for this matter, a continuous feeding of coal is required. And since you burn the coal, everybody knows that the remainings after you, let's say, extract all the heat from the coal, whatever is remaining is the ash. And similarly, on a very bigger scale, if you use the coal for thermal power plant, the waste remains is the ash. And now, if you see the ash, or I would say whoever has opportunity to, let's say, interact with the ash, even for the household into the villages, probably they will be able to understand that this ash, if it is in dry condition, probably is very difficult to handle, because those has a very, very small particle size and have a very low density volume. And for that matter, let's say the control of ash in dry condition is very difficult. So the ash generated at a boiler point is to be transferred to some particular area where you can store them temporarily and then utilize them as and when required is a big challenge. And for that matter, temporarily, this ash would be mixed with the water, put it into a pipeline, and then pump that slurry. Slurry means it's the mixture of water and ash, where you have a high water content, or I would say the ratio of ash and water would be somewhere around, let's say 60% of water and 40% of ash, or would be even higher water content. And then you transport the entire thing, that slurry, into the ash pond and dispose. However, government has a notification that any power plant operator, or I would say power plant generator, should utilize this generated ash, because this ash, once generated, it has no other purpose, and then laying and dumping into ash pond is not that much allowed as per, let's say, Indian standard. So the utilization, the government has issued a gazette for all the power plant operators that in the, let's say, at the 50% of fly ash generation, 1 year from the date of commissioning of power plant, you need to utilize 50% of ash which has been generated in first year. Then the 2 years from the date of commissioning, that means the total ash generated, 70% of ash shall be utilized. And 3 years from the date of commissioning of power plant, you need to achieve 90% ash generation or ash utilization. And then from the 4th point onwards, 100% ash utilization generation is to be required for any power plant a generator or operator. Now, CEA, Central Electricity, let's say, body, which is a government body from India, has some guidelines for which some of the guidelines might have been changed time to time. This is somewhere around old, where I have picked it from 2007 version, that ash content in coal 40% for 660 megawatt unit, 30% for 34% for 800 megawatt unit, and this is based on Indian coal, and 10% as in imported coal. Now, as a nation, probably I would consider that we are not that much blessed, because if we burn 1 kg of Indian coal and 1 kg of coal or imported coal, probably in Indian coal, the ash generation or ash would be, let's say, considerably higher than you will get it for imported coal. So the preferred choice for any of the power plant developer or I would say the operator is to import the coal if it is there in the viable feasible metrics of their plant operation, because importing a coal is not a small thing. You probably need to spend much more compared to you get the coal from any of the coal blocks from India. And for that matter, there is a big difference between the generation or ash generation if you use imported coal or if you use Indian coal. Then the height of the ash dike. So usually the height would be from 18 to 20 meter limited, but this is not the, I would say, a stringent guidelines. Sometimes so many other power plant operators have achieved height more than 20-25 meters as well. The ash dike should be sufficient for 25 years of plant operation. This is very complex, because if you consider that for 25 years of thermal power plant operation, whatever the ash is generated for that 25 years, and you want to dump them into ash pond, probably you will be requiring more than, let's say, 20 times or 30 times area than you usually have for assigned with the power plant. Then there is some, let's say, generation of bottom ash and fly ash. Not go into that one, these are the guidelines from CAE, which would be used to derive how much area we will be requiring to store the ash. We have some calculations also. This is as per CAE 2010 guideline, that if you have a 2 into 500 megawatt configuration for power plant, and if your coal is Indian coal, then land required or recommended is 500, earlier prior to 2010, and the land has been now need to be, let's say, required is a 250 acre for this configuration. Now, if I say that I have a 2 into 660 megawatt or 2 into 4 into 660 or 4 into 800, all the configuration. This is the recommended land required to given to ash pond area in which you will be then dumping, or I would say storing the ash as per government temporarily. But once you store it, I have never seen any of the ash pond which can be got emptied later on. So definitely the storage is permanent. Let's say if we try to take a classical example, how the volume, I am just this example, I would like to emphasize that you just see how much volume is generated every day, and for that volume you need to make a provision to store them into the ash pond. So let's say if we have a 700 or megawatt or something, so if it's 732 has been considered, then you have a coal consumption is ton per hour is approximately 376 ton if you consider this configuration, and in this case this would be 411 ton per hour. And correspondingly, if you say the ash content in the coal is 33%, and this in this particular option it is 34%, the plant load factor is 90%, and the density of the ash into the pond is 1 ton per meter cube. Now, if you see normally our soil, or I would say the density, ground density is somewhere around the range of 1.8, 1.6 ton per meter cube. And here it is 1 ton per meter cube. And now if you see, compare this density with the water density, you will find it is as light as water. And that is why it is very much likely that wind can blow this dry ash, and fuming you can experience around the ash tank. And correspondingly, if I see the volume which has been required, this is per volume per a year. So total volume required in ash pond, considering first year of fly ash and only 1.75 years for bottom ash and coal ash, then probably I will be requiring this much of cubic meter land for storing only for 1.75. And if you multiply this with the let's say if you consider for 25 years, probably you will find that the huge land parcel of land is required to store the ash. Now, if you say that my storage area has a height only 5-6 meters, and then if you divide this figure with the 5-6 meters, probably you will get the area assigned for, or area required for the ash pond. And correspondingly, if you say 1 year of fly ash and 25 years of bottom ash and coal ash, and that is for 3 units, this much is the cubic meter storage required. And if your final height is 20 meter, you divide this figure with the 20 meter and you will get the area you need to store for the ash pond. So the problem is very, very worse, and probably one of the, let's say, the biggest challenge for almost all thermal power plant, and not only thermal power plant, this challenge for our ministry, or I would say our nation also, to utilize this much amount of ash generated every hour. If you come out or sum up all the thermal power plant running simultaneously in India, probably per hour we will be generating a huge number of ash which we cannot utilize in turn, and then that unutilized ash would require more and more storage area every day, and we probably are the let's say responsible for them, because we are mainly focused, or I would say dependent upon the coal or thermal power plant. I will skip this. Okay. Now you understand that initially I have this much of embankment raised. So this would be a 3 embankment or into the plan area, and this is the section. I will be raising. Then I will dump the ash between these two dike. Until that time, this has been, let's say, filled up. I will construct the another dike close to this, so that whenever I would like to raise the dike in upstream. So this is the embankment. This is the upstream embankment for stage 2. This for stage 3, and this the stage 4. And in between this would be the storage considered for the ash. And that storage height is supposed to be more than 20 or 20 meters. So if you see this 277 and it is going up to 289, so 12 meter of this much and 7 to 8 meter of for the starter dike. Now let come to let's say the construction of starter dike. The starter dike means the stage 1 embankment, which is mainly constructed using the earth, excavated earth, whereas all the subsequent raising are generally constructed using ash as an inert material inside it, and will be having a earth cover all around the embankment. So this would be a mixture of, or I would say the blending of ash and the soil, so that you will be utilize some of the ash even in the construction of embankment. However, whenever you do that, it brings a more challenge for the designer also and for the contractor also. This is some configurations or how the area within the embankment can be utilized with the ash consumption. So if you see, this is my entire embankment, and I have used as a zoned embankment in which the darker area probably can be used filled with the ash, and you have all around the earth, and inside of the earth you will be having some of the ash zones, so that within the embankment, without compromising the slope stability of embankment, you will be utilizing some percentage of ash within the embankment. Sometimes you don't want to take a chance, so you will be using only let's say one size or one side of the embankment for ash utilization, and on the downstream face, probably where you have a major concern on slope stability, you will not be using any ash zones over here. Compared to the previous one, the ash utilization is reduced, but then the demand for good earth, which can be utilized for embankment, is increased. So in that case, this one is more economical compared to this section. Or maybe you can utilize based on the slope stability readings and some particular challenging construction aspect of constructing the inclined chimney, you can do let's say more alteration of having an ash utilization same, but no compromise on the downstream face of the embankment. And typical sections, this has been already designed in one of the projects where we will be we handled the ash storage area development and then the raising of the ash embankments. Then now let's say raising. Raising means if somebody says that you construct an embankment 20-meter height in a straight go, probably you will require a huge amount of earth also to construct this, and at the same time the construction will take a very long time for raising that 20-meter height embankment in one go. So in the major aspect or a major I would say the approach is to go stage by stage 1, stage 2, and then you raise the embankment or a dike so that your embankment will be raised and you will be having a more storage area. So now if you see, you have a two compartment, compartment A and compartment B. So here it is a left compartment and right compartment. The entire thing is ash pond. And in this area, you can see there are some slurry has been discharged from few points. Those would be the ash slurry. And you can see one particular pipe which is coming, and then all this ash goes from that point. This is the discharge point actually. Since the ash particle will settle into the progressive path, the water will be then, let's say, collected in some of the areas where you have planned the decantation well. Take this particular water again from the ash pond and then use some sedimentation technique to extract the fly ash particles from the water and recycle this water, send it back to the power plant and use the same water for mixing with the ash again and then dump it into ash pond again. So that is how the entire water supposed to be recycled, because you will be using huge amount of water just to convey, or I would say just to transport your ash in slurry form from your thermal power plant to ash pond, dispose them with the water, collect the water from decantation well, and then recycle the water, or I would say pump it back to the power plant and use them again. However, assume that this particular ash pond is in operation. So that means you will be continuously discharging the slurry into this ash pond. And at the same time, it is not possible to construct the embankment onto the inside of the dike because there will be a plenty of wet area, or maybe you have very saturated area on which the upstream raising may not be possible. So to do that, whenever you have one particular ash pond filled, probably use or charge the slurry into second compartment and use this particular embankment for, or I would say the area for raising, and then swap them. The moment you have, let's say, embankment ready, now you see the discharge of slurry is, let's say, converted or placed into this, and this ash pond is ready for the raising. If you go back, there was no raising onto this. It was initiated because this ash pond is about to fill, and for that matter to raise this, so they have raised this embankment height and then started discharging or disposing the slurry into this compartment till this compartment is ready for another raising. And that is how the embankment has been raised. Now, if you see in all this, or whatever you are saying, looking is, this ash dike has increased into raising. So this would be the starter dike. Then there will be a first raising. This would be a second raising. Then there will be a third raising, and so on. Based on your final height, probably you will be then decide how many numbers of raising you will be required. As we said, the natural contour is in this direction, so that the higher area or the higher level is on the upper side, on the north side, but the lower laying area or the lower level area is on this side. So you use this as a natural terrain, construct an embankment in such a way that you discharge a slurry from this point. The ash will be deposited into this area, but the water will be traveled to natural course of the land, and then it accumulated over here. Collect them into settling pond, and from this settling pond, you again pump it back to your power plant. So this would be a topography which is favoring your ash pond construction. But in some of the areas, even if you allocate land, but you won't be able to utilize the area for storage of ash dye. Why? Because if you see over here, there is a contour of 515 over here on this, and you have a contour of 495 over here. So practically, you have approximately 20-meter difference between these two area within the ash pond. So the moment you discharge a slurry from this point, everything will rush to the point number here, and then you will not be able to get the storage volume sufficient. To get the storage volume sufficient, you would be requiring 20-meter height embankment in one go, so that the natural level of the pond over here shall match with the highest point of the embankment over here, so that you will get some effective storage area. Now you see, this is a practical example or a practical ash pond. We will get this area using the Google Earth later on, but you just see that this is the existing lagoon 2, this is the existing lagoon 3A, and these are the proposed lagoon, because I want to extend this ash pond into this area, and for that matter I have a division that lagoon 3B has a 140-acre land, and another 60-acre land need to be required, not now but maybe after 2 years, so that you will be able to safely dispose the ash within the ash pond area allocated. Now come to geotechnical consideration. Let's say how many ways an embankment can fail. One we call it as a, let's say, let us go from left to right. One is the liquefaction of a deposited ash. That would probably increase the pore water pressure, not only on the surface of embankment, but on the foundation as well. And foundation can fail, and subsequently your embankment may fail. The second one is the overtopping of the ash slurry. Maybe you do not have sufficient freeboard for the ash discharge within the embankment containment, and if you try to store more and more, probably at some point the slurry will be discharged and then overtop the embankment. While rushing out, it will erode the downstream face of embankment, and progressively your embankment will fail. The third one is the major one, which is that the piping through foundation, that the pore water pressure or hydraulic pressure on this side is tremendous, whereas your foundation soil is not suitable, and correspondingly subsequent erosion would occur with this path, where the particles of the foundation soils will be emerged out on the downstream face from the base, and subsequently the failure would occur. And the last one is the sliding failure of the downstream face, where you do not have a sufficient or I would say the working condition of drains or internal drainage systems, so that the pore water within the embankment is too high, and subsequently your embankment is too steep because you don't want to use more earth for the embankment construction, and in that case probably your downstream face would slide. And this is the way let's say the failure modes of the ash dike can be considered. One is the seismic triggered failure, second is the overtopping failure, the third one is the piping one, and the fourth one is the slope stability issue. So mostly for this matter, the criteria for safe design is in this particular form. You can summarize them. That material properties for deciding the type of dike and method of construction, you will require information on the foundations, and for the fill or means the the material from which you will be raising your embankment. For no overtopping, you need to have an adequate freeboard, and as per 10635, you need to provide minimum 1.5 meter freeboard. Then foundation stability, that shear stresses, or I would say the exit gradients are supposed to be within the limit, and your slope stability is supposed to be more than what has been specified or stipulated by Indian standard. And for that matter, if I see the stability analysis, in static case, my factor of safety is supposed to be more than 1.5, and for dynamic case, it is just more than or equal to 1 as per IS 7894. And seepage, there are IS 9429 for internal drainage, and you need to arrest the piping, or I would say the internal drainage for your embankment supposed to be perfectly in position to reduce the pore water within the embankment, because as you raise the height of the dike, the pore water pressure will increase. This is another classical, I would say, example or illustrations which we can made it, that we have one particular embankment and we try to store a water, or I would say the equivalent water slurry into this. So this is on a storage side, this is on a downstream face, and I have only a horizontal filter. There is no chimney drain into it, and such a way that the seepage line would be altered over here, and then from this point onwards, the horizontal filter will be able to take care and safely discharge the intercepted water. And for that matter, if I take the slope stability, the slope stability is approximately 2.32, which is more than 1.5, so this is adequate. But if you see, in entire case, if this is the let's say the paratic line, the entire this area will not be let's say get saturated, and correspondingly you will be expecting more strength. Now if I see, I will do not consider the let's say construct the filter in the way we try to simulate into previous case, but I have simply installed some rock toe or some filter at the toe level. Inside that case, my paratic line will get extended to this point, and if this do not function very well, probably this paratic line will further intercept into the downstream phase, which will further create a problem. And now if you see, the factor of safety is 2.34 in this present case. And if the slope stability or the slip circles are not passing through the foundation soil, which means the earth which you will be using for embankment are governing the case, and your foundation soil is sufficiently strong enough to withstand the embankment. Now, if I say I will be using the horizontal filter, continuous filter for the dike, and I will be also using the chimney drain, which is also continuous. In that case, for the same problem, it is very important to note that whether you have a chimney drain or not, probably your horizontal filter is sufficient enough to take care of your all seepage problems, and probably you could avoid constructing the chimney drain if you can, or let's say if you want. Otherwise, for a better conservative design, probably lead chimney drain is also get constructed, so that if anything or any choking is occurred into horizontal filter, probably your internal drainage is sufficient to take care of your needs. But this was for the first embankment. How about when we construct the embankments subsequently? That means this is the starter dike first, this is the another first raising, second raising, and correspondingly, if I go on raising the paratic line, since I will be using the horizontal drainage, the peratic line will come and then let's say figure out like this. But in all the cases, my downstream face of all the embankment would remain dry and much away from the peratic surface. So this is the slope stability for starter dike, which is 2.1. And if I consider the slope stability of raised embankment, which is approximately 1 for the seismic case. This is with the static case, this is the seismic case. But we need to check the individual slope stability also, and we also need to check the global slope stability also. So global means I will not check the slope stability of the individual embankments, whereas I would like to use, or I would see, even if a global factor of safety or a global slip surface is to be occurred, how that particular would be occurring. And you see the area or the slip circle area for the, let's say the individual cases and for the global cases are different, whereas the global slope stability is 2.9, whereas the static slope stability for the starter dike is 2.1 something. This is also true when, let's say, where you have multiple raising and you have utilized a typical earth available around the ash pond for construction of dikes. So it may not be possible that you will get the very low permeability soil available all the times for the starter dike. So if somebody says that very low permeability soil, which indirectly meaning that you want to utilize clay for construction of starter dike, which is also not, I would say, perfectly okay. And you need to have a good matrix between the shear strength, some of the phi, some of the C, and you need to have a mixed type of subsoil conditions which can be offering the more shear strength compared to the cohesive soil type. So if you see, we are checking the individual slope stability for each rising. Sometimes they may have some similar values, sometimes based on the loading, based on the, I would say, the slope you select for the raised dike, it would differ. And the slope means 1:2, 1:3, or whatever the moment you increase 1:3, 4 or something, the raised embankments are much more flatter one and they are much more stable. But in that case, you will be losing out some of the ash storage, because the flattening of this raising would practically result into the lower storage volume of ash, and no developer would require, or I would say consider this as a feasible one, because the area allocated for the ash pond is same, and you want to utilize more and more area and try to store more volume within the same area. And that is only possible if you raise this embankment in a steeper way, so that you will get the more volume. This is for a global slope stability. And if I check the global slope stability, in a static case, I will say the calculated slope stability is 1.8, whereas for let's say seismic case, it is approximately 1, which is just sufficient for my requirement, because you will be requiring factor of safety 1 or more than 1 for seismic cases. And here we will be using the horizontal seismic coefficient as 0.1 G, and whereas the vertical seismic coefficient is utilized as 0.5 times of your vertical acceleration coefficient. These are some, let's say, actual photographs of the ash dike. You can see this is the top portion, and this is the rock toe, where your, let's say, the chimney or filter drains will be finally emerging, or let's say connected. So your all water connected or seeped into embankment will be intercepted by the internal filter drainage or internal drainage arrangement, and then they pass on to rock toe, and then you will find some water seeping out from the dike to outside. This water would be then channelized so that there will be no ponding occurs, because the ponding and more soil saturated on the downstream face will create a more problem for slope stabilities. This is another design of rock toe, where the drain and the rock toes are, let's say, connected, or I would say designed in such a way that you do not require a separate drain for that. And in such case, you will require a huge amount of rock and a big pieces of rock toe placed in such a way that the slope stability arrangement as well as the drainage arrangements for a channel would be formed, which will be able to sufficiently convey the seeped water into further low-lying areas. Someone say that how will you construct your chimney drain, because it is a very thin section into an embankment. So I just would like to highlight and illustrate that first the embankment is supposed to be constructed, and then you need to excavate the trench, and within the trench you need to then dump the loose soil or loose sand with a high permeability, which will act as a I would say the water conveying channel. And you can see this particular chimney drain is constructed on embankment on a second level. Again, you need to excavate the trench and fill with the sand. And as you goes on raising the embankment, such particular chimney will be then become as a through connected barrier from top to bottom. Someone say, okay, why we need a continuous blanket type of, let's say, filter, horizontal filter, because the sand is our costly element, and for that matter, can we have some, I would say, the intermittent horizontal drains, maybe in form of pipes or maybe in form of trench cutted along the embankments. So I'll be just explaining. This would be a 3D particular analysis. You see, this is the chimney drain, and this would be the drains which has been connected with the main rock toe over here. So in conventionally, this entire let's say area, one particular layer of filter drainage is provided, but that would be very cost consuming, because the sand or a clean sand of that much of quantity would be very much costly for a project. And technically, if you try to address that, probably at an intermediate level, you have some drainage path given from which will be connecting from chimney drain to your rock toe, and that would be something like this. That I don't know whether the clear path. Yeah, this would be okay. So this is your chimney drain, and this is your trench which will be connecting from rock toe to your chimney drain, and these are the normal earth areas, so that you will not be using the potential entire area for your filter drain type of material. And that kind of 3D seepage analysis, or I would say seepage analysis, you can perform to find out the best suitable spacing between these two, let's say, the drainage channels or drainage areas, and that way you will optimize your ash embankments. But the crux is your downstream face supposed to remain dry, and your slope stability or your slope stability of a downstream face should not have any problem, because any problem to the slope stability failures probably would lead to failure of your embankment. This is one, let's say, photograph of one of the filled ash pond. You see all around, these are the dike, or I would say embankment top. This is the ash, and this is the water which has been accumulated into the pond. So basically, though you will be discharging the slurry, but you need to design your ash pond as water retaining embankment, or I would say just like you have a rot reservoir or a embankment for your dam or a storage of water, because you will be never knowing that your ponding of water would occur on which face of the ash pond, unless you have a very specific operational control where you will be discharging your ash from one point and all the ponded water will be specified to be diverted to some locations where you have I would say, specifically or specially designed embankments. But when they dry, probably they become like let's say, white powder, or I would say a very low weight material. And if the wind blows from here, probably the fuming will take place and all these ashes would be then transported, or I would say you will experience around that area. And that is why staying around the ash pond or residing around the ash pond is usually considered to be problematic. And if you do not control this fuming, probably you will find that the farmers close to your ash pond will be agitating, and because their crops, their land, everything will get contaminated, or I would say mixed with the ash particles. And to control that fuming, you have two ways: that you may grow some vegetations inside the ash pond, and secondly, you may use some water sprinkling inside the pond so that your top surface of the ash will remain always wet, and you can let's say use that particular wet top layer as a barrier which will prevent a fuming of ash ponds in and around the area due to wind. This is the summary of some of the key ash ponds of the India, where many of the developers used different configurations. Let's say there is ultra mega power plant in Sasan, originally constructed by Reliance Group. The dike height is planned for 20 meters. The top height of the embankment is 6 meters. The side slopes were 2.5 by 1, that means 1 vertical and 2.5 horizontal. On a downstream face also 2.5 horizontal, 1 vertical. Rock toe is 1 meter height and approximately 1 meter in width. The soil cover and turfing has been used for downstream protection. And within the pond, 1 meter thick LDPE, low density polyethylene membrane was used. I think I missed that part. Since the ash coming from the boiler may contain some of the harmful, let's say, particles, maybe in terms of sulfur or maybe in terms of other chemical components, mix of this ash with the groundwater need to be prevented firmly. I would say we need to be sure that there will be no leachate mixing with the groundwater, because that would have a very much of adverse effect if that has been happening. So in almost all new power plants, or I would say the previously constructed of 10, 10 to 15 years back, have a provision to use LDP as one of the barrier membrane, which will be laid into the pond bed so that there will not be any leachate going from the ash pond to groundwater. And similarly, if you see the Rajpura, which has been constructed by L&T, there will be in a seismic zone of I would say 4, considered to be in 4. The dike height was 8 meters, and the upstream height was considered to be 2:1. But if you see the downstream face, it is flatter than the upstream face. This was done because they want to store more area, because the upstream slope is steep, the downstream face is flat. Then you have a 0.5 mm thick, 500 mm thick, let's say sand chimney, and you have a horizontal sand blanket continuous, or I would say the 10-meter spacing. And then you have a rock toe. The turfing was used for downstream face, and HDP lining of 0.5 mm thick, or I would say 500 micron thick HDP line membrane was used. And that way, if you see the plenty of embankment or plenty of, let's say, power plants are using different configurations. And some of the, if you see the Rourkela or Bilaspur, probably they will be using much flat downstream and upstream faces. You see 3:1 slope. Then they will be using 1.5 meter thick sand chimney and 1 meter thick horizontal sand blanket, and corresponding rock toe is very thick or very strong, 3.5 meter high and 1.75 meter wide rock toe. It all depends on your slope stability calculations and considerations. You may be using some different configurations and calculations. Try using conservative configurations. For more, I would say, use some key Indian standards. So I will be listing some of the standard references which are mainly used for the design of ash dikes and the ash ponds, and they are more related to embankment dams and internal drainage arrangements, slope stability requirements, freeboard, design of under seepage controls and all. That can be used, or you can further refer them for better understanding of slope stability requirements and then the procedures and the guidelines. Other guidelines or other reference documents are standard design criteria for balance of plant, thermal power plant. These are available online. If you can search them, guidelines for balance of plant design and the thermal power plant design, it will be available. But one of the key document which our, let's say, National NTPC or National Thermal Power Corporation has made, which is guidelines for design of dikes in ash disposal area. And this is not publicly available. So if you have any known friends into design department of NTPC, probably you may get the copy of it. It is very old document, but very valuable informations you will find into this document. Okay, so we all talk about the proportion of the area, the design, typical configurations, some consideration of slope stability, consideration of internal drainage requirement, but still you need to learn a lot from the failure of embankments, specifically for ash dikes, because what will happen, you try to store one particular area ashes, and then if it is breached, probably all agricultural land or urban land around that would be permanently contaminated with the ash. and then the removal of ash from the land probably would not be possible. And that is why the breaching of ash dike brings a very serious concern. And in some cases, it has resulted into a stoppage of power plant in that area. And it depends on the environmental strongness or strength of that particular state or a pollution control board. Do you see some unreasonable or unusual thing into this figure? Let me highlight you. You see some of the overtopping has occurred from this dike, and it has just started on overtopping. That means the person who is operating a ash pond probably may try to fill the ash up to some particular level, which is above the minimum freeboard requirement. And in a progressively, what has happened that the ash slurry probably again try to say dispose or overtop the embankment, and then you will see some progressive collapse has occurred all along the dike. We'll have some illustrations on embankment. Sometimes the contractors do some, I would say, mischief, or there is some specifications for, as I said, that raised dike is also can be constructed using the ash. But if you do not use them properly, then there will be an issue. And in this case, if you see the central core of embankment supposed to be by soil, and there are some particular fly ash areas, but actually what you have seen is that contractor might have dumped all the ash inside and they covered the area or covered the land or covered the embankment with some particular nominal thickness of earth. So you will not be able to see or visualize what has been lying inside the embankment. But when the failure would have occurred, probably then you will understand that entire thing is got washed away in and around area. Sometimes you find that the soft toe, as we have discussed, if our paratic line is emerging out or touching to the downstream face of this ash slope, probably you will find that softness, or I would say soft toe or soft downstream toe has been occurred, and then you see some ash will be emerging from that embankment, and that would lead to progressive failure of the ash pond. This was breach of, I would say, the freeboard. The minimum freeboard requirement is 1.5 meter. Now you see this is the top of the dike, and ash has been already filled up to this. If you try to fill more, probably what will happen, this ash will be then started overtopping the embankment and leading to progressive collapse. You can see this is the another problem of I would say the rain cuts, where you do not have a proper earth cover on the embankment which has been utilized or constructed using the ashes. So if you see, the earth cover at the top is this much thick, but that much of thick of earth cover is not there on the sides. So subsequently what will happen, that in a 2 or 3 storms, probably this entire thing will be eroded into the rain cut. So if you see, it has been started rain cuts on this area or this area around, but here you see there are plenty of rain cuts are progressive. And if you do not address this kind of rain cuts with the immediate backfilling, probably this would lead to further collapse, or I would say breach of the main embankment, and your ash slurry will get spreaded in and around the ash pond. This is a more closer photograph. If you see, this is the, let's say the main dike is up to this height. This is the raised height, and this is again a raised height. But if you see the raised height, you hardly see any earth cover, or even if the earth cover could have been provided, probably they might have slide down because of the steep slope of your raised height. And the same thing has happened over here, that ash, or I would say the embankment, has been slide down to this area, indicating that there is some issues with the slope of this dike. I think we have some time. I just would like to cover a few more aspects of seismic slope stability of this S-dike embankments.
Yes, sir.
And-
Yes, sir. Please continue. We have enough time.
Yeah, so this was one of the case where, let's say we have some ash dike which need to be raised, but when we try to check them for, let's say for seismic slope stability considerations, this do not fit into what has been already provided, and probably this ash embankment require more strengthening measures to make them stable for considering the seismic slope stability. So if you see on your, let's say this is the layout, and there are some particular boreholes. Some boreholes have been drilled on the dike embankment itself, and some boreholes were drilled into the ash pond area itself, just to understand that what has been the property of deposited ash and what is the property of your earth which has been used for embankment. But if I compare the SPT-N values, probably for almost all cases, the SPT value is less than 10 for many of the boreholes, and these are the, let's say, borehole investigations. For embankment, these are the, let's say, the embankment. But if these are the cases where the boreholes were there drilled from into the dike itself. So if I compare them, I have somewhere around 5 to 10 SPT values for approximately 6 to 7 to 8 meters, or up to this meter, I would say 5 to 6 meters, which is actually the deposited ash. And that way, if I try to check that if my additional embankment is to be raised or placed onto the deposited ash, probably I will be having a bearing capacity issue also, and I would be having some issues with the slope stability as well. This is the precise one. I would say the slope stability, very low SPT blow counts for the pond ash. Then installation of piezometer shows very high moisture content into the pond. So that means the pond deposited into the pond, let's say ash deposited into pond, those are saturated. And if someone considers the liquefaction potentials, probably you have an entire foundations which can be, which can have a very high liquefaction potential, and it will be not possible to support the embankment directly placed on this ash pond. The problem was that not to, let's say, place the embankment exactly onto the embankment footprint, but if you place a raised dike on deposited ash, probably if that is not stable, then your entire raised dike is not stable. And that way, some investigations were carried out. This was the geometry which was checked. The existing condition was that only the starter dike has been placed in place. All other subsequent raising is to be made but the study was made to check whether the slope stability coming from two softwares is in agreement, and what was the seismic slope stability for such kind of a raised dike, considering that the ash is of very low shear strength. This was the property which has been considered for, let's say, for foundation layer, for starter dike, for compacted ash, and for settled ash. So if you see the angle of internal friction, the settled ash we have been checking for 28 to 31. So this was the range of the values for which the embankment would be used with the Poisson's ratio and permeability as shown in the table. The problem was first modeled in Fleck, and if you see, the problem shows that there is a global factor of safety or global instability induced, and I would say the starter dike would remain intact, and at the same time your foundation is also strong enough, so whatever the failure is supposed to be induced, it would be into within the deposited ash only. And if I supposed to check the let's say the individual slope stability, probably those are the veneer stability of the raised dike surfaces. And if you see, the factor of safety is very low, and corresponding factor of safety is approximately 1 for the global case. The same thing was modeled, or similar problem was modeled using GeoStudio also, and then we try to compare both of them, that the dry conditions and wet conditions, the results of the Fleck and the GeoStudio was compared. But if you see the pseudostatic is for zone 3, up till now it's okay. I would say for seismic zone 2, this is also still okay, but the moment you enter into zone 3 or zone 4 or zone 5 category ash ponds with the embankment configurations like this, where you have a 1:3 slope along with the 6 meter of I would say the embankment width of the raised dike constructed with the compacted ash properties, won't be sufficient or won't be suitable for your seismic zones 3 and onwards. So you need to be very careful. This was one particular study that with the typical configurations in which qualify, or whether they will qualify for higher seismic class sites, or we need to limit them only for two site, let's say pseudostatic zone 2 or zone 3 type of embankment only. Then time history analysis was also carried out by applying the let's say the bedrock motion at a base level, or I would say considered to be a equivalent base level considered. And then Bhuj earthquake, this was the Tuft earthquake and Bhuj earthquake. And then the displacements of the embankment was checked, and these are some readings for some particular observations. It is very important to understand that the seismic coefficient, or I would say the PGA, peak ground accelerations, for checking the slope stability, and for that matter, I would recommend to consider one particular summary which has been prepared by SEED, where you can see the horizontal seismic coefficient considered for all such kind of embankments has been summarized. And if you see in US, the PGA 0.05 to 0.15 G, we have a zone factor for zone 3 is 0.16 G, and which means that mostly zone 3 or less than the embankment PGA has been considered for seismic slope stability. And if you see Teresa's recommendations on what they say is a severe earthquake, then violent or destructive earthquake, and then there will be a catastrophic earthquake if you have a PGA more than 0.5 G. And Corps of Engineers and some other, these are already available on net. And stability of raised dike, that also depends on the Z by H, that means the height and I would say the height of the wedge, which is unstable, versus the height of the entire dike, versus the KH, which is the seismic coefficient for that particular wedge, inertial coefficient, to a max that need to be considered. So you need to be very careful in selecting the PGA for natural ground. PGA, if you have a filled up ground, or I would say some deposition has occurred already over here, and then the PGA at the top of the embankment. And that this information is very much important if you really try to do some seismic slope stability of such kind of a starter dike or a raised dike, where embankments are not directly resting onto the natural earth, but they are resting on deposited ash type of material, and the behavior of that in a seismic let's say event is very complex, not ascertained, so you need to be very careful for that. Some another key aspects or key references, those who are more interested for seismic slope stability can refer them. And let's say you can also use Magdasarian seed, the classical paper. And that's it. Thanks for, I would say, for listening to me. Probably I would ask for some of the questions, or would wait for some of the questions so that we can answer them, or we can discuss more into it.
Thank you so much, sir. Participants, if you want to ask the questions, you can raise your hand. Manohar, sir, you can unmute yourself. Hello. Hello, Manohar, sir. Any other questions?
Sir, I have one question. Sir, which method was used for the slope stability analysis in Flake software?
Flake, it does not use the classical limit equilibrium method. It uses the what we can say SRM, the strength reduction method, and which I think all finite element packages are using, whereas the Rock Science or Slide, or I would say the GeoStudio, they are using classical limit equilibrium applications. So there is a lower bound and upper bound solutions from them. And if you are getting a factor of safety close to in both the cases, probably it's a simple problem. And if you find it that there are the variation into it, definitely you will be modeling some complex geotechnical structure.
Yes. Actually, in past, we have tried to work on the Flake software with the slope stability analysis, but especially in meshing the slope, it was having some errors. I don't know. We have tried very hard on working on that, but we couldn't do that.
Okay.
Some
because
errors were
the meshing is not automated into Flake, especially for the lower version applications. This was, I think, we did this in 2015, so almost 6-7 years back.
Yeah.
I think if you refer it nowadays software Flake version, probably you will find that there are some important development has been made for meshing the applications, and not only meshing, because each block will be modeled independently. So the mesh compatibility, or I would say node to node connectivity, need to be ensured. Otherwise, you will get a very erratic reading.
Okay. Sir, can we import the meshed model into the software where we have done
Yeah.
meshing with the other software?
Yes. I think yes. The zones and everything you can import into FLAC. That's for sure. I am sure that it is possible.
I have not checked upon the latest version. I will see, and sir, in the future we'll work together in the same topic. Okay, and in future, if I will need any guidance for the flag software, then I will contact you for it.
Sure.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Any more questions? Participants? Sir, I think no more questions we are having. Participants, if you are having any questions, you can send it to us. We will surely send the questions to the expert and we will try to have the solution for them also.
Sure.
So, thank you, sir. Thank you for the wonderful session with the topic, the ASH Foundation, Fly Ash Founding. So, we are grateful to have you in our session, sir.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.